Now that we've discussed risk identification and risk assessment, let's understand the other steps in the risk management procedure. Risk prioritization. After determining the probability, proximity, and impact of the identified risks and their impact on the project, if the project is still within the risk appetite of the organization, we can proceed with the next step of the risk management procedure, that is, risk prioritization. In Scrum, all identified risks of the project are taken into account when creating the Prioritized Product Backlog in the Create Prioritized Product Backlog process. They are also considered when the Prioritized Product Backlog is updated in the Groom Prioritized Product Backlog process. Hence, the Prioritized Product Backlog is also referred to as Risk-Adjusted Prioritized Product Backlog. Now, let's look at how risks are mapped with user stories and epics in the Prioritized Product Backlog. In the Create Prioritized Product Backlog or Groom Prioritized Product Backlog processes, prioritized user stories and epics from the existing Prioritized Product Backlog and the prioritized list of risks are combined to create an updated, risk-adjusted Prioritized Product Backlog. Let's analyze how this is done. The steps for updating identified risks in the Prioritized Product Backlog, which contains user stories and epics, are as follows. 1. After identifying and assessing the risks to the project, create a list of prioritized risks, e.g., the risks can be prioritized by value using expected monetary value techniques. 2. From the list of prioritized risks, select the risks that need to be mitigated, and also select the risks that require immediate mitigation actions, that is, the risks for which the Scrum team should take specific risk action in the next sprint. 3. Create a list of user stories by breaking down epics, or large user stories, into manageable user stories and/or writing new user stories. Update the user stories in the Prioritized Product Backlog. Then prioritize the user stories according to their value so that the Scrum team can deliver them in the ensuing sprint. The value of each user story may be evaluated based on its expected return on investment. 4. Combine lists in Step 2 and Step 3 and prioritize them by value to arrive at the updated Prioritized Product Backlog. Figure 7.4 illustrates the risk prioritization process. The next step in the risk management procedure is risk mitigation. The mitigation actions to address the risks will depend on the priority of those risks. As discussed earlier, the team prioritizes risks based on the risk's probability, proximity, and impact. The iterative nature of Scrum, with its rapid turnaround time and feedback cycles, allows for early detection of failures and snags. Hence, it can be said that Scrum has a natural mitigation feature built in. There are numerous types of risk mitigation actions that the team can use. Generally, these mitigation actions are proactive or reactive in nature. For example, in the case of a project involving a cruise voyage to increase an organization's brand image, a common risk can be inclement weather. For this risk, a mitigation action can be if the risk materializes, then one of the places to visit during the voyage will be dropped from the itinerary. This is clearly a reactive mitigation action. Similarly, a proactive mitigation action can be postponement of the cruise voyage until the meteorological department predicts good weather for the duration of the planned cruise. Not all risks need to be mitigated, as some with very low probability of occurrence or with proximity beyond the project or with very low impact can be accepted. A risk can also be accepted in situations where there is apprehension of secondary risks. These secondary risks may deter the product owner from taking any mitigation action. Several identified risks updated in the Prioritized Product Backlog get mitigated during the Create Deliverables process when the tasks related to user stories defined in the Prioritized Product Backlog process are carried out by the Scrum team. In Scrum, the ownership for managing risks related to business aspects is clearly with the product owner, and the ownership of implementing risk responses during the course of a sprint is with the Scrum team. The Scrum guidance body can be approached for advice on the way risk responses are implemented and whether the planned and implemented risk response actions are aligned with the guidelines of the organization. The Scrum Master keeps a close eye on the potential risks that could affect the project and keeps the product owner and Scrum team informed. The next step is risk communication. As mentioned earlier, risk communication step runs in parallel with the other steps of risk management procedure. Risks are communicated not just to the internal stakeholders, but also to external stakeholders who need to know about the risk. Information provided to stakeholders related to risk should include potential impact and the plans for responding to each risk. This communication is ongoing and should occur in parallel with the 4 sequential steps discussed thus far: risk identification, assessment, prioritization, and mitigation. The Scrum team may also discuss specific risks related to their tasks and the Scrum Master during daily stand-up meetings. The product owner is responsible for prioritizing risks and for communicating the prioritized list to the Scrum team. An important tool which can be used for communicating information related to risks is the Risk Burndown chart. Risk Burndown chart. Expected monetary value, EMV, is one of the preferred tools to be used for assessing risks. The information gathered during risk assessment using EMV may be used to create a risk burndown chart. A risk burndown chart depicts severity of the cumulative project risks over a particular duration of time that is acceptable. The probability of the various risks is plotted on top of each other to show the cumulative risk on the y-axis. The identification and evaluation of risks on the project and the creation of the risk burndown chart are done in the initiate phase. Then, at predetermined time intervals, new risks may be identified and assessed, and the existing risks should be reevaluated and updated accordingly on the chart. An appropriate time to do this is during the sprint planning meeting. Tracking risks in this manner allows the team to recognize trends in risk exposure and take appropriate action as necessary. Figure 7.5 shows a sample risk burndown chart.